When I first moved here, I worked alongside a community-based organization doing HIV work. And so we were doing home visits. People were super sick. We didn't have access to testing or treatment yet. And so I'd go into homes with our Kenyan team and sit alongside of people. And after a few months, I got really tired of watching people die of a treatable disease. And I met a man named Kibet who was lying under the shade of a tree, 6'3", weighed like 90 pounds, and so near death. And I just thought, I'd worked in HIV care. Like, as long as something is treatable somewhere in the world, it really should be accessible everywhere. It's just how I believe. And felt the frustration of that and the disparity of that. And so on that day, I sat alongside of Kibet and I told him, as long as God gives you life, I'd like to walk alongside of you, not having any idea what that meant, but thinking that I did, thinking that would mean he'd have a few more weeks to live. And then we'd go to his burial like we went to everyone else's burial who were people dying of HIV and AIDS. Yeah. But then I heard about this clinic that was 10 miles away and it had just opened. It was one room. And I told him, I think we should at least try, see if there might be something available there. And so we live in a really rural area and it takes work to get anywhere. But on an early Friday morning, I went with him and drove into this space, and that there was a 70-year-old doctor in the doorway who I didn't know him from anybody, but he introduced himself to me as Joe. And he said, "What are you doing here in the middle of nowhere?" And I said, "I'm Julie, and I'm tired of watching people die." And he says, "Well, I know exactly how you feel. Let me show you something." And so he took me into the room where there was HIV test kits and there was antiretrovirals and there was the treatment that was needed. And people just a few miles away, including myself, didn't know it existed yet. And so I really started, I was overwhelmed and started crying. And at that moment just felt like the dreams that I thought I had for this community are so much smaller than what God wants to do. And so it started a journey of really mobilizing people for HIV testing and getting people connected to treatment. And so watched a generation of people who would have died from HIV and AIDS. They didn't, because they got on treatment and their kids didn't have to become orphans. And
Wow.
And really, I think there was so much fear and stigma that could come down, and love led that. And it was Kenyans that allowed me and welcomed me to walk alongside of them and somehow be a part of that story. And I've been so changed because of it. So Kibet and his wife are both members of our staff. We now run hospice that has been going for the last 13 years now, and started very small and has grown. And we have about 100,000 people that we serve in a year in different capacities within the community and at 2 sites. And we run.
For example,
we run a hospice. So it's a 24-bed inpatient facility for adults and children, but a little bit different than what Americans would think of as hospice, because many of the patients who come to us, especially HIV patients, the goal is for them to get better and go back to the community. And the age range would be much lower. So it would be children in 18 to 35 would be the main population that we're serving.
Wow.
We also do take care of a lot of people who are suffering with different forms of cancer. But what we've decided at the hospice is that rather than call them patients, we really believe in hospitality. And so we call them guests because we want them to be received and welcomed in that way. And in everything that we do, to be treated with honor and dignity. And we know that we can't control all the outcomes, but we believe that anything that we do with love, that it's holy to God. And we've just seen that over and over again, time and time again. So we have the hospice, and then we also run a hospital that's about an hour away from here that opened in 2019 and it's grown much bigger than I imagined. I mean, all of this has grown bigger than I thought it would. Right. But it feels like it's step by step trying to be faithful with what's in front of us, and God then leading us to the next step. And it's a team of over 100 Kenyans working together and dreaming together and just believing that God is in our midst and that he loves the people who we're welcoming. And so I feel like it's not just about what we can give, but also what we're receiving. It's just the exchange all the time.